Today we had a fantastic guest in Colm, Nally. Colm is a Dublin man who has become or moved his loyalties to Louth and is currently working with the Meath senior team after a little bit of work at club level in Meath, in the Meath County too, in Gaelic football. He's released 2 different books, with his latest book, Game-Based Training Sessions for Gaelic Football, and we had a pretty interesting conversation just on his views of the development of the game and so on. How do you find it, lads?
For some mad reason, he wrote a book and decided to have you contribute. Lord knows what led him to that. He must have rang around a few places for that to happen.
So we told him how bad a decision that was, and that was the guts of the podcast.
Yeah, and we interestingly discovered towards the end as well, he's another man that's taken a massive about turn in terms of careers.
Yeah, proud member of the goalkeeper union as well, like myself.
Yeah, it was a fascinating conversation. There was definitely a lot to take away and learn from underage coaching right through to coaching at the top level of county football. So yeah, I suppose without further ado, we'll jump right in, and we hope you enjoy today's conversation. So, Colm, what I suppose fill us in a little bit about your background. Balbriggan native, and you're expat up in Louth, and you're working in Meath. So you're really covering that East Coast pretty well there. How did you go about, I suppose, that whole move in the first place?
Cheers, Damon. Yeah, it's quite a mix, and there'll be no love lost between the 3 of them counties, to be honest with you. I came from Balbriggan, as you quite rightly mentioned, and I played all my football with O'Dwyer's. But like every young fella at the time, when I got married, I married a Drogheda girl, so I moved down to Drogheda. I remained playing in Balbriggan in the Dublin leagues for a year after that, but it got too difficult with all the travelling. You were kind of saying every match was like an away match. So what happened was, the housing estate that I was living in was next to Newtown Blues. Newtown Blues needed a goalkeeper and I needed a club, so it was a happy marriage. So I moved down there in 1996. So we've been with the Newtown Blues ever since then.
Nice. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, you're right. There's definitely no love lost between the 3 counties there. I suppose before we kind of jump into even your experience and what you learned from playing and coaching in Newtown, you played at Dublin. You featured in a few Dublin panels. I believe you, from recollection, you've a point scored in the blue jersey. And here we're talking about you playing in goal. So maybe back in a time when, pre-Stephen Cluxton walking up to win All-Ireland finals, talk to us about that.
Well, my club was O'Dwyer's, as you mentioned, and they had the great John O'Leary who was in goals. So I always joked that I was the most famous unknown goalkeeper in Ireland at the time, because everybody knew that John played outfield for his club, but they never knew who played in goals. And that was me for a long time. But I came through Dublin minor panels and under 20s panels, and I got a few goals with the seniors. But back, this shows you how old I am. Now, back in 1993, Dublin played the opening of pitch against Donegal, and I was brought as a sub-keeper. And Mick Pender was actually in goals from Kilmacud Crokes at the time. And Donegal were All-Ireland champions. So it was quite an occasion. They had 5 or 6 subs. They've used them all. And I was the sub-keeper when someone got injured. So I had to go out to field and I scored a point. So that's my claim to fame. And I never got called really again for Dublin since then. But, that's my claim to fame story,
Fair play. So I suppose bring it up towards your life in Newtown Blues and playing with them. You ended up in the Louth Goalmouth as well, playing there and getting involved in coaching to some degree as well. Was that kind of when your I suppose your interest in coaching kind of really took off, or was it were you still kind of more playing focused and a bit like ourselves, where we're turning up, we're going through the trainings, we're putting in the work, but maybe not pulling ourselves aside to focus on the training side, or did you amalgamate the two?
Well, when I played with O'Dwyer's, as I said now, I loved it. I followed my brothers down to the club and came through the ranks there. And we were a Division 2 senior side in Dublin and had great time playing. But my career at that time was, I'm a civil servant, but at that time I was a Dáil usher. And this is pre iPhones and whatever. And I used to work long nights and late hours. So I'd always be jotting down previous training sessions. And that's where I kind of developed my love of coaching as such, because I wouldn't be able to train with them regular. Like if the dog was sitting late, I'd have to be sitting there till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And so what I do is I'd be writing down previous training that we did and trying to recreate it on my own on my days off and stuff like that. So I would journal and jot down the previous training sessions, trying to keep up to date with what the lads were doing. And that was my first foray as such into coaching. And then what I used to do is I was captain of the team. I used to like to take the warm-ups of the team, pre-matches and pre-training and that. So I even like while I was playing, I was angling into the coaching end of it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then when I moved down to the Blues, the Newtown Blues are the most successful club in Louth. They've over 20 championships, and they'd be the kind of the standard bearers in the county. And it was my first time being exposed to sort of what a tradition is. Now I know it's all relevant to whatever county you're in, but these are kind of the standard bearers within the county. And they won 9 championships in the 60s. There was no Leinster championships at the time, but they were beating teams up and down different counties. County teams used to come down to play them in the 60s. They were that good. So we were brought, the Blues was kind of brought up on that tradition. But when I kind of went into them, they had kind of faltered a bit. They hadn't won a championship for years, and they had kind of dipped a little. So it was just a nice fit. So lucky enough, we went on to win 3 championships during my time playing with them. I captained them, and I was player manager actually with them for a little while. So it was kind of a case like everybody that's involved in clubs when you come to your 30s, you end up taking some sort of coaching role. So I mean, I became player manager with them at 32 years of age. And then when I kind of finished playing at 38, I got involved in their juvenile section because my own kids were down there, and I've been there ever since. So I was always kind of going down that road of coaching, if you get me. I mean, I was always kind of had an interest in it and sort of trust upon it then, probably sooner rather than later, and gave it a shot there. But that's how I ended up kind of coaching in Newtown Blues, and then I got involved with Louth development squads. I played with Louth for 5 years. I captained them in the championship, and played in the first ever qualifier match against Tipperary. That was 2001. We played, Louth played Tipperary, and it was played on a Saturday night in Thurles, not Settle Stadium, in a smaller pitch at the time. And because it was Saturday night, it was the very first qualifier, of the new formats as such, So that was very interesting at the time.
That's pretty cool. It's quite interesting to have I suppose worn the Dublin underage jersey and then progress through to Louth senior jersey. At that point did you notice any differences? Obviously Dublin is traditional, football, but it's centre. It's the centre of Gaelic football. But did you notice much of a difference going in there into the Louth setup straight away, or was it kind of similar enough kind of approaches at the time?
No, a great question. And again, looking at what we're going to be discussing later, I've been thinking a few of these things. And see, in Dublin at the time when I was growing up, like my brother played, Ronan played for Dublin, and we were always knocking around. O'Dwyer's at Briggan at the time had Stephen Rooney, George Wilson, and John O'Leary, and Paul O'Carroll won an All-Ireland minor medal with them. So we were always kind of providing players to the county panel as such. But the difference I found with Dublin and Louth is Louth, because of being the smaller county, would take a chance on potential, where Dublin didn't have to. If you had potential, right, there was chances are there was another goalkeeper that was better and was ready for you. So they would kind of opt with them. Now, I know a lot of things have changed since then, but at the time, it was very, very hard to sort of get a breakthrough to them Dublin teams, because the competition was so, like, you might look at the corner for it, geez, that lad's not bad, he has some potential, but there's another fellow with Sylvester's that, you know, we know he can do it. So a lot of lads slipped through the nets in Dublin, and just because of that. But when I went down to Louth, I played a year, and then Paddy Clark, or Paul Kenny, sorry, actually, he's actually, he managed the minors. He was the manager of Louth at the time, and he took a chance on me and brought me in. And I was a year being a sub, but like, he took a chance on the potential, let's say, you know, that sort of stuff. And then once you get exposed to that higher level of training, if you're interested in it, you know, there's a good chance that you might reach your potential, whatever that may be. So that's the big difference I noticed coming from Dublin down to Louth. I say this to my own lads here, that a senior team in Louth and a senior team in Meath is the exact same as a senior team in Dublin and Kerry and whatever. Like, these are senior for a reason. They're good senior teams. So the top 3 or 4 teams in Louth would compete with probably any county top 3 or 4 teams, if you get me, you know. So the standard is just as good. The commitment levels are just as good. Just the only thing that they don't have is the sheer volume of players, you know. But they definitely have the talent, and that's the way it was then too, because the Newtown Blues was certainly a step up for me from the level I was playing with O'Dwyer's, and we got to a quarter final of a championship a couple of times. So we were kind of top 8 at one stage, top 10 in Dublin, and I definitely found Blues kind of a bit of a step up when I joined them.
That's fantastic, and we can really see that in I suppose, the diversity of teams competing for the senior All Ireland club, year in, year out. You know, there is no like dominant side constantly there. You know, there's always some kind of a push. I suppose from that, then it'd be great to kind of touch on like how you've. I suppose you've a couple of great willing recruits at home, and as you said, you got into coaching through your own playing, but then you really kind of, you know, stepped into it a little bit with the underage through your own lads at home. I suppose, how did you find that experience starting off with them at a young age?
Well, if you're lucky enough to have a family, and if you're nowadays, it can be it's not as sort of definite that it's just boys, but because girls are mad into football now, but everywhere I went, I had a gaggle of kids hanging out of me. So and inevitably what they do is they'll stand behind the goals and get the balls and kick them back to whatever team I was involved in and we're coaching, and that's how it started. So I always used the saying from like Forrest Gump, like life's like a box of chocolates. I took over the Newtown Blues under 7 or under 8, and when you take them over, then you have no idea what they're going to turn out to be. You're down there to give something back, and you're down there to share a few of the experience that you may have had, and hopefully that the kids may enjoy it. So we actually went on to have a brilliant time with these kids. They've won about 14 underage championships. They've won 3 senior championships on the bounce with their club. They're all bilateral players. There's 9 of them on the county panel at the minute. Now, that's in all my coaching. That's what makes me proud is looking at the bunch of players that have come through. But a lot of people would say, "What did you do with them?" And on reflection, what I did with them was made it fun, made them feel special, you know, and just got them to love the game. Like in Draughta's competing. Draughta's a soccer town, really. So you have a lot of distractions in terms of there's numerous soccer teams. There's far more soccer teams than Gaelic teams. So everybody played soccer and Gaelic. And one of the things, right, a pet hate of mine, is you only play Gaelic in Drogheda or in Louth for 6 months of the year. So you were letting the kids go for another 6 months a year to go off to play something else. So chances are some of them could fall in love with another sport. Now, we were lucky. We only lost about 2 players out of all that bunch, you know, 2 soccer. The rest of them stayed with us and are still with us in some capacity. But like that's kind of kick-started my love of coaching then, because it was from the, you know, looking at the sheer enjoyment that these lads were getting out of playing and turning up every day. Like we would do little things like we got them to design a training jersey, but they weren't allowed to use our team colours. So they would come back with orange jerseys and black jerseys, things like this. And what it did was made them stand out and made them feel different, right? Now, we didn't know at the time that these were good practices and we were building rapport and we were setting them along the way. But they still talk about them days. We'd bring them every year to Croke Park. We'd bring them to see matches, Leinster finals, because the Leinster Council had a policy of every kid got in for €3 if you got a group pass. So we'd always bring them once a year to the Leinster final. And I remember, like, because I have it down in my notes here, that one of the days after a Leinster final that Dublin played Kildare, I think, some of our players were copying Alan Brogan's hand pass over a player's head and catching it and as it bounced off the ground, you know. So we'd be saying to him, "Where did you see that?" So I've seen that in the Leinster final the other day. And like, so stuff like that was really, really powerful. But again, we didn't know at the time that we were doing that. We were just kind of doing what was natural to us because we were enjoying spending time with these lads and you know, trying to show them a good time. But what we were doing was building the bond, making them feel special and making them feel part of something, a sense of identity within their club. And what's happened now, they're all on average 24 now, and they're driving it. Now they're now the standard bearers. They're now the ones that are passing on the tradition, which is great to see.
So I suppose that kind of that I suppose really opens up a lot of like how your own kind of coaching ethos really developed. That it was really very much focused on the enjoyment. I feel from what you're saying, just that like the kids not necessarily realizing they're coming to training to learn new skills, but actually just coming to training, going to watch games, you know, going to watch any of the senior club games or anything like that, and just actually enjoying the sport. Is that kind of how you, I suppose, would that be the top, I suppose, focus for you with your coaching approach, or is there a few other parts?
Well, look, see, again, it's the hierarchy of value. Okay, so it depends where you are in your coaching sort of journey. So if you're working at a specific age group like juveniles, you're going to coach them different than if you're coaching a county team. So it's about identifying that. Like, I believe now that like there's coaches that makes teams better and there's coaches that make players better, and some are kind of more adapt at one or the other. So again, it depends where you are. So again, at that stage, I was finding my foot and learning so much. And one of the things that I would kind of always sort of offer as advice to young coaches is to coach as much as possible. Because if you coach as much as possible, you're going to have good times and bad times, but you're going to learn so much. So when I be coaching younger players as such, it would be really fun element, right? And again, a lot of game-based activities. Now, game-based activities, people kind of misinterpret. They think that it's a game all the time. It's not a game, right? All the time, because like I know, like even from, we're deemed as kind of a relatively big club, Newtown Blues, but we wouldn't have 30 minors. You wouldn't be able to play a game. We wouldn't have 36 senior-olds to play a game. So what you have to do is kind of create segments or little mini games for them to develop. So we would kind of coach an awful lot underage through mini games and different types of games as such, right? With the adults now, it's different. Like I was listening to Eddie Jones talk on the High Performance podcast recently, where he mentioned that he does no coaching with the England rugby team because all their technical work is done with their clubs and back home. He just coaches systems and stuff like that. So it's probably similar when you're with kind of an adult club team or an adult county team. You would be kind of, you would, without sounding boring, you would have a tactical periodization plan where you would have your mesocycles and macrocycles planned, and you would be doing different things in them that's relative to whatever group you're with, if you get me. So underage would be an awful lot of skill-based work, okay, and you know, you're trying to teach them the skills of the game, the bilateral movements, all that sort of stuff, where adults, you'd be kind of, if you're with an adult, you'd be looking at kind of systems and game plans and things like that, because you'd really expect the top senior players to have all the skill set and the mindset to play at that level, you know.
Mm-hmm. Have you actually, I suppose, from your experience of working with senior teams in different counties, as well as, you know, your own inter-county coaching experience as well, have you found that is, I suppose, that is the case, that bilateral abilities are quite strong at that level, or do you kind of feel like there's still room for that to be worked on throughout the season?
Oh, without doubt, there's room for it to be worked on, right? But I think that every player should have an ILP, an individual learning plan. Now, when I'm coaching underage teams, you're very much involved in developing that ILP for the player. But when you get to sort of county level, the player nearly tells you what they need to improve on, because the player is very, very aware of what they need to improve on. So again, they kind of nearly designed their own ILP, if you get me. So the thing that I think what's happened when the likes of this lockdown, and this is our second year of experiencing it through an inter-county prism. It's a brilliant chance for players to develop their skills. I really think, because I was watching a documentary on Dan Carter recently, and about the amount of hours he put in practicing on his own, right? Now, we kind of slipped away from that because we've taken over as county managers and as club managers, the coaches now. We're taking all the time. There's no time for players to practice their skills. Now there is. So I think there's always room for that, right? And if you talk to any county player, whatever age, they will tell you that there's areas of the game they can improve on. And when they tell you that, they're kind of looking for you to help them along the way, to give them a few ideas of how they can improve on, right? And every player is always looking to improve. So there is room for that. And now is a good time, for fellas have plenty of time if they have access to a pitch and a bag of balls, they really have a good chance to kind of develop skills. For younger players, right, one of the things we used to do is we used to make sure that for membership, every young player under 13 years of age got a ball as part of the membership, right? And that was for them to practice their skills on their own at home and stuff like that. And we'd show them a few ideas, and give them a kind of little bit of direction. But again, as I said, older players, you're nearly just working as a sort of an ally with them. You're giving them a few ideas, but they're driving the improvement, if you get me. So yeah, I think there definitely is room.
Actually, just something that you mentioned, just with the games-based training and that approach. I suppose for maybe for a good bit of maybe the noughties and the early part of the last decade, there was a lot of focus on the physicality of the sport and of Gaelic football and the progression of that, with a lot of teams possibly pulling back from maybe the games-based approach to training session, skills-based approach to training sessions, and that you've kind of been pushing very much, the opposite, not necessarily the opposite way, but you've been kind of like, hey guys, we need to marry this up a little bit better. How did that go down, or how have you felt that's gone down? Obviously, where you are now, there are people in my own club down in Killarney, have your book and talk about it, and they're implementing it. This is happening all over the country, but for a period of time there, that wasn't the case. There wasn't a synergy between the physical side and the skill side and those games approach. Did you, I suppose, ever find that you'd much pushback against that approach, or have to kind of maybe sit back and think about your resolve a little bit there and go, am I doing the right thing? Or was it always something that just players bought into straight away and it just clicked?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, right? And I suppose to answer that, a couple of things is I've been lucky enough, as I said, I played into my late 30s, and I was player manager of my first adult team. So that allowed me to recognise the many shades of a dressing room. And what I mean by that is, if you're 18 years of age and that, all you see is opportunity in the dressing room. If you're 38, all you see is problems. So one of the things that I could do by having a foot sort of in both camps was you sense and you got good instant feedback on some of the activities you might have been doing in training. And again, by having my own children involved and coaching them, I was constantly getting feedback from them, right? But what I mean by that was I would try a lot of things on people. I would guinea pig them, and the game-based stuff, right, was a winner all the time. The players just enjoyed it so much more, and that was enough feedback for me, because at the end of the day, the most important people in all this is the players. So the players felt that they were developing, they were getting something out of it. But if you could kind of create a space, Damien, that the players had ownership on it, then the whole thing took off better, or takes off better. So that's I would take my direction from a lot of the players. I've been on the Master Tutor Group now for nearly 20 years, and we're responsible for, particularly in Leinster, rolling out various different coaching courses. And when we were doing the award ones and the award twos, all people want on it is drills. So we came up with an idea. I don't call them drills. I'd be saying drills are for dentists and builders, right? So we would kind of call them activities. And drills to me just have a picture of straight lines and lots of people waiting and not mirroring what happens in a match. And games-based training to me is, it can be still like an activity set out on a pitch with cones as a starting point and cones at an end point, but the movements and the activity is recreating a moment or scenario of the match. So what I try to do is, it doesn't matter what age players we are, is to explain why we're doing this and get them to ask questions and, you know, and creative questions, ask them, do they understand, do they see it? And I let them develop some of the exercises, you know, like some of the times when you're preparing a team, particularly like say for instance in club team in Louth, and you're playing a particular team and you know that they have a dynamic half back line who are just going to bomb forward all the day. I try to create that in training. I try to get scenarios where we're defending half back line, bombing forward. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then what happens is players say, but they're more than likely going to do this or that. And it's perfect. Then you know you have them thinking. Do you know what to expect? So to me, that's what game-based training is. Yeah, on the courses, there is pushback to that. And people think that juveniles have to do everything in straight lines and cues. Now, I would say back to that is, you're probably right. There's a bit of that needed. But what you really need to do is get up to the kind of mimic the movements as quick as possible. But if you get up to the mimicking of the movements, Damien, and everything's breaking down, well, then you probably have to go back in odd time to lines just to kind of master the skill. You know, like there's too many, lots of coaches out there say you don't see cones in Croke Park and things like that. And they're right. But for the learning phase, you need to kind of be able to highlight, like I'll give you an example. I use an exercise where we call it the dirty offload. And it's basically right in front of the goal. And on purpose, we're playing a bad ball to a player who can only catch the ball and offload it in the direction he's facing. Now, and then you know, so he has to catch that ball and he has to offload it to a runner. So you can kind of put a tag on the runner. But if we play games all day, that might happen once or twice a week. But if you can put that in an isolated scenario, you could practice it about 30 times. So you're going to create a better chance of them getting better at that. Now, if I just play games every week in training, right, that might happen once or twice a game. And that means only 2 or 3 players are being exposed to this. We're putting it in trying to create a moment of the game scenario, if you get me, solution-based situation. They could get exposed to about 30 or 40 times of that. So that's the big difference I see in it. And as that, probably to answer your question, the resistance probably came from traditionalists who thinks that they, you know, you're back to doing 800 meters and 200 meters and things like that. And I'm not against any of that either. It's done, right? But I'd always say to them, well, like, do it with a ball. You know, put a ball in your hand when you're running.
That's fascinating. One of the things I just noticed just as you were talking a while ago was just about the you're taking notes. Even when you're in working late in the Dáil, you were writing down training sessions, reviewing them, looking back over them. So you're quite reflective in your approach to your coaching. I suppose like learning from mistakes or something I mentioned to you, I'd like to chat to you about. It's something that I suppose we could all do with managing a little bit better, but often coaches, especially in underage settings, can be a little bit slow to make changes to their plans or anything like that. How have you found your own kind of development with kind of learning from little mistakes along the way?
Yeah, like if you don't identify your mistakes early, they'll identify you. They'll come back and they'll haunt you very, very quickly. And we all make mistakes. And one of the biggest mistakes I found that I learned at a young age was communication. Communication is vital, like, and even in terms of if you're not playing the player, or if you're moving them somewhere, or if you've taken them off, and particularly young players, you need to kind of communicate with them ASAP and tell them why, in your opinion. Now, you can also back that up and say, look, I'm not saying this is the right opinion, but I just felt, and blah, 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 and give that to them. So I wasn't great at that at the start, and not comfortable with it. So I made a lot of mistakes around that area, and presuming is an awful mistake too. Like, you know the saying, like that assuming makes an ass of you and me. But I felt at times there, right, like I can remember playing a match, county minor final, when we were being really, really beaten well. And I didn't really put any subs on because I assumed the players didn't want to go on to it. And I was wrong. and I was told afterwards, my son would have loved to go into a county final, like, even though you were being beat by 10 points, little things like that. So I always kind of like would reflect and try to right them wrongs by, learning from them. So, you're always learning from mistakes. But I think coaching underage, right, really, really kind of shows you, because you need huge empathy to be an underage coach, because you have to put yourself in the shoes of the young player, right? And imagine if it's your son or your daughter, and if you can kind of empathize with them, you will view things a lot different in that way,
Did you find it hard, Colm, to carry that that focus on fun and enjoyment from juvenile coaching into a senior setup? What kind of, I suppose, even belief in yourself where you're like, maybe this can't be fun anymore, maybe it has to be all business? Or is there any kind of issue around that?
Well, Shane, I think what happens there for me is you can't have the level of fun will change. So, for instance, like if we be training with the Meath seniors, like there might be a segment of training where I have it teed up that we're going to have a laugh or a joke, but like the focus of the session will have to be kind of deadly serious in that. But there'll always be an opportunity, right? Now you have to be very, very careful, right? Because a lot of people say to me that sport and work is the same, and they're not, because banter is massive in football teams. Banter is not massive in the workplace. Banter is nearly kind of slagging and whatever, and not everybody's for it. So you have to be very careful. Not everybody's able for banter. But I try to create scenarios where you have, particularly if it's a week of a match, there'll be a segment there where the exercise will be totally fun. Like you might be playing last man standing or something like that. Little fun games like that. And something, what I found is one of the reasons we play football is that we don't want to grow up, right? We still want to be kind of in touch with our childhood. And so if you can create some sort of element, like it doesn't matter if you play bulldog or something with a group of 30-year-olds, they're still going to give it the best and have to laugh. They're still kids once it starts. I've never heard players coming off to just stupid, because they realize the value of fun. Like I'm always looking at other sports and that. If you look at Instagram there now, your man has taken Instagram by storm, Jose Mourinho. If you look at some of the activities, I was watching an activity there today that they were doing in groups of 4s or 5s, where they had smaller cones hidden under big cones, and they were having a race to see who could find the small cones. Right now, these are professional footballers, and somewhere along their training week, they have found time for fun. So to me, that there's enough sort of feedback in that for us as coaches. We have to find some element for fun. Now again, like you can't have it all. It can't be all total fun, but there is a place. There is space for it. Totally,
You've mentioned Jose there and Eddie Jones as well. You obviously you're obviously looking around. You're taking in other sports. You're learning from other sports, which I suppose for quite a while in the GA maybe was a little bit frowned upon in some areas. But I suppose what areas of what sports in particular have you really focused in on to take some learnings from? Or is there any particular coaches or anything that their path you're just like that's very
everywhere.
interesting?
Now, I mentioned Eddie Jones. I'd be a big fan of him, and I would have watched his career develop a lot. And one of the things about him all along was he was always open to sharing. Now, he goes around to various different sports. He's lots of different friends in various different sports, but he also opens his training to coaches, and we're lucky enough to get over it to see his training. He's very, very welcoming to that. So I think like coach education in GAA is still relatively new in terms of how long the organisation is, where all the IRFU, the FA and all that have a coach educating department that's far older than the GAAs as such. So they are more used to rolling out courses, conferences and things like that. Now, ours is coming on an awful lot, but one of the reasons a lot of people go to other different sports as coaches in Gaelic football is there isn't a lot for us in our own game out there. So we have to source the information. So what I find with the likes of rugby, rugby has brilliant values and leadership styles to follow, and they have brilliant team sort of ethics that you can pick up so much from. The likes of ice hockey, I'm a big fan of ice hockey, and about the space and the speed and the decision making that you need on in their game. I think soccer is fascinating. I recently bought all Pep Guardiola's coaching books and Randy Mulstein's from Manchester United's coaching books. And what they are to me is they're all diagrams and tactics and that. And that's what I love. And I love to read about how the team's trying to create space, how a team's trying to swing the ball. And then, of course, you have the basketball. Now, like a lot of coaches, a lot of GA teams have been using basketball, and a lot of coaches claim that Dublin use basketball like this. I think they use a myriad of all these different sports. And I think that's what you have to be. You have to be open to look at all these different things. Like if you think of how the blanket defence was first beaten, and it was about the patience of swinging the ball from one sideline to the other sideline. Like that's a real soccer tactic. And about how you're getting your game breakers on, your players who can beat you on a one-on-one, your slipstream runners, all that sort of stuff, you know. So I would follow an awful lot of that. But likes of Eddie Jones to me is very, very open, and you pick up so much from him. I love Sean Dykes from Burnley, I think. I love like his gruff appearance. Everybody thinks it's about sweating the shirt, right? Where his kind of motto is affect the person and you affect the performance, you know, something that you wouldn't associate with him. So I would be always looking at the likes of them. I think Brendan Rodgers now, again, who talks about having the 360 degrees view of the player. You know, he's very, very cutting edge. And again, another one that's very, very interested or very, very open to sharing. So that's where I would have picked up a lot of my stuff from in that. And again, from the point of view of sharing stuff, it's probably the background of being with the tutor group as such, because we were involved in coach education and trying to design courses and trying to share information, you know. So again, there's not a lot of it out there, I feel, and a lot of coaches don't want to share. They don't want to share for a couple of reasons, like because one of the reasons like is the minute you put something out there, you're just going to get some criticism of people. You know, people just love to pick fun, and you know, and you're going to get that. Doesn't matter. You could have the best activities out there, and they still have a problem with it. And they're given their opinion, which they don't require any understanding or accountability to give their opinion. They don't understand what the whole occasion is that you're trying to do there. But that's what happens. Now, sometimes I'm comfortable with that. Sometimes I'm not. But I still think the benefits outweigh the negatives in terms of that.
Have you noticed like kind of tactical innovations over time? You can almost see it replicating another sport, but maybe 10 years on, just in a slightly different way, you know, over a slightly bigger pitch or a slightly smaller area. Like that overcoming, the way Dublin overcame the blanket through just switching it like soccer did, kind of nearly Pep style now, and you see it across in other sports like that.
Well, look, without doubt, John, one of the sayings in Gaelic football is that county football is about 2 or 3 years ahead of club football. So whatever trend you see in county football, that, you know, sometimes filter down to club a couple of years ago, but a couple of years after. But you're so right. Now, what I see basically is that like Dublin are tremendous at the minute. The only way teams will catch up and beat Dublin is to play them regular, right? Because the more you play them, the more you learn about them, the more you see about them. So they're the standard bearers at the minute. So they're the ones that are locked away in St. David's or whatever, coming up with new because they're the ones that are out there trying to, and we're all trying to catch them, right? But the more you get exposed to them, the more you look at them, the more you see that they're doing, and you try to add bits of that to your game, either to counteract what they're doing or to kind of add to your game, you know. So from that point of view, like we're all looking at them at the minute, seeing how we can catch them. Look, the soccer to me is fantastic because there is huge sort of tactical sort of innovations in that. You even take Liverpool now, which are fascinating study at the moment. Are they tired? Are they kind of have their energy levels dropped, right? Because everybody reckons now. This is just sort of the common view that a team has a 4-year cycle. Now I know you have the likes of Dublin and the All Blacks and that who are kind of countering that, but they'd be the odds. So like if you talk about the 4-year cycle, Liverpool could be coming to the end of that 4-year cycle, you know.
Tony Strudwick used to say at Man United that teams had a 7-year cycle, which if you look at the way the teams at United dominated nearly in 3 separate sections throughout Ferguson's reign, you can kind of see that there as well. I've noticed as well that the way hurling has kind of changed with more and more and more scorers coming from way further out the field. It's almost like when the 3-point line was brought into basketball, that suddenly the scoring shifted out a bit. So now we're going to have to figure out not just how to defend around the D or around the goal area, we have to defend there and the 65. And we may start seeing more scores now coming from the 45 area as people look to kind of blockade that area as well. Have you ever read Inverting the Pyramid? I think it was Jonathan Harding wrote, or Jonathan Wilson, I can't remember which. It really interesting. It kind of details how tactics in soccer changed over about 100-year period. So it started like with 5 forwards, 3 midfield, and even more forward, a few in midfield, and only a couple at the back, and then flipped over the course of the next 6 years. And with Guardiola's style now, it's nearly flipped back again. It's come for full circle. Like, I've noticed similar with the higher up coaches tending to be more likely to share. And like, I've done the tutor course and everything like that for GA, and like, when we were like, absolutely brilliant course when you're just there with 20 other Award 2 coaches looking to develop. But like, you have like a top coach in Kilkenny and a top coach in Offaly, and they're just sharing everything, completely honest with each other. And I think back to me in Ward 1, and you had 2 coaches from clubs beside each other, and what would you do there? Sure, we keep a few stats. Oh yeah, what would you keep? The score. And they just would give nothing away. But then as you go further up, they're throwing everything out, half looking for the critique so they can go back and make themselves better and make that competition the next time they play that bit more honest. Colm, when I saw you in Croke Park a couple of years ago, you were presenting at the Games conference, and you had that record of the couple of notebooks where you took everything down, and you noted yourself how everything went from straight lines to the odd diagonal line to everything now, or particularly in the past couple of years, everything be more curved lines, more mayhem, just kind of putting a few points and seeing what happens. When did you really note that transition in yourself, or do you have like one particular book where, the first few pages here are all straight, but at the back now it's gone more opener? Like, what eventually brought you there?
Well, what eventually brought me there was, I suppose, was coach education. Like, me being exposed to kind of coach education and learning. So, like, again, we all tend to follow trends, and at that stage, that's what everybody was sort of doing. So I would have been kind of following from my early coaches, and then, as I said, when I got involved with the coach education, and then my first coach, or one of my first coaches was Paddy Clark. Now, Paddy, Lord rest him, passed away recently, but Paddy was a very, very renowned coach, and he coached the Ireland team with Brian McAniff. He won championships in 5 different counties, but Paddy's background was soccer. So he would have started with the kind of the small games end of it, right, and the sort of, the chaos end of it. So that was a heavy influence on me then, and kind of had me rethinking on my kind of philosophies at such a stage. So I'd say around the late 90s, and early 2000s when I started thinking differently. And again, like, going back to what we were saying earlier on, there wasn't a lot. I used to source, I used to have videotapes and things like this of American football training and even baseball training. And my brother used to get them for me over in America. And I'd be looking for anything, but I kept noticing this different thing. Like, the lines were gone now. There was kind of parts of loose play, free play in whatever sports we could, that I could get my hands on. So it was that sort of stuff. But like, it's only like, different teams would challenge you too. Like, so when I went into kind of the adults team end of it there, right, my own club, and you knew you had to up your game. You had to kind of find out new ways of stimulating them and getting them interested. So I'd be always trying different things in training and taking note of what worked, what didn't work. But what was working all the time was the free play more so than the queuing up for lines of stuff. Now, look, part of that still goes on, right? And like, again, as I'm kind of mindful at the time, like, if you're playing, say, a National League match on a Sunday, and you're training on a Friday, you're probably only going to do about 15 or 20 minutes hard work, right? And there's nothing wrong with your work to rest ratios being longer then. So if somebody had a snapshot of time and looked at that session there and saying, sure, he's got them all in lines there, they don't really understand. You might just be in there because you don't want to kill them, you don't want hard work, but you have to do something. And you don't want to lose a player to injury, and you've less chance of losing them to injury when they're standing in a line, like, but you're only kind of ticking a box at that stage, if you get me.
How do you sometimes find balance in the novelty of a game and the keeping players challenged while at the same time working towards, this is the one thing over the next 2 to 3 weeks that I really want to improve? Like, I was chatting to Paul Kilgannon about this before, and he said, with underage teams, they're at the stage now, I have 6 exercises or activities, and I pretty much use those and get as much as I possibly can out of those, so they're really good at them, and then we might look to move on. And sometimes I find it, like, am I coming up with a new game for the novelty and a new challenge? Or is there actually a purpose to where we're going here? And how do you kind of balance that sometimes?
Well, again, as I said, it depends what level you're working at. And I go back to the macro cycle, the mesocycle, and your microcycle of training. Now, that sounds like a lot of jargon, but a lot of coaches think that way, whether they know it or not, right? So you have if you're coaching underage players, right, boys or girls, football or hurling, the skills have to be covered. right? You want to improve them in the skills. So you have to plan them in your macro cycle. So there has to be a skill element of every session to improve the skills, right? But in that macro cycle, you have your mesocycles and microcycles where you might have an important game coming up that you have to get them kind of clued in for. So your training would alter there. But I would always have, particularly at the development phases of players, I would have skill elements in that plan. And that would be kind of my bedrock of all my sessions. Now, sometimes you might get that wrong with adult players. You might spend too much time on that when they don't need it. They probably need more. But what I like to do, and I think the players respond to this now, is like, if you don't focus totally on the opposition, but you need to focus something on the opposition. But what I like to do when I'm focusing on the opposition is to do it in real time. Try to come up with an activity or a game, right, that you make up that you think that they might do, that might replicate how they play. And there's great learning in that. Because if you can kind of, say you're lucky enough, like we are lucky enough to have 15 against 15, whatever, you can set up a team that might play against the way the opposition are going to play. And in that way, you're given lots of learning and opportunity and chance for fellas to discuss. That can be done at club level too, John. That can be done for young players too, because if you're playing another 14 championship match and they have a big full forward, you can create that environment and training. And at that way, that's kind of solution-based training. You're exposing young players to that very, very early. Right? You're saying you're going to face a big full forward. What happens when you're facing a big full forward? How do you kick it into them? Right? Let's work on that. Let's work on a team kick. That sort of stuff. And
that's a nice opportunity then to, like, particularly with a younger team, when you're saying we want to develop skills and game sense along together, to like have your activity set up where you're pumping in a high ball, but then say, okay, let's pull it out for some maybe more isolated skill practice that has the long kicking and the high catching or the breaking it. If you're marking a taller player, now let's put it back in again. It's a really nice way to bring both on together.
Colm, one of the things that I'd be very interested to know is just how you link in with S&C coaches then with ensuring that you're actually, I suppose, your S&C coach is going to have the physical development that they're going to be focusing in on, but do you interlink with S&C coaches, especially at senior level, to develop some games based around hitting markers for them as well, to bring about those physical improvements, or do you rather keeping them a little bit more separate?
Well, I'm very, very lucky. Like with I have been, as I said, I've been coaching. A coach with the Louth seniors and now with the Meath seniors, and all my experience with S&C coaches have been brilliant. And the lads, I would have worked with 3 or 4 different fellas, and they're the needs of the players are always first with them. So we're very, very lucky, Damon, in terms of having access to GPS and things like that. So everything is monitored. So they were quite happy that if we could hit the conditioning through football. Now, there's times we didn't hit the markers that were as expected, and players hate it, but they might have to do some mass runs at the end. Okay, but I've been very, very lucky that they've all been very, very kind of saying, no, if you can hit the markers through football. Now, what happens the other side of that is sometimes I might lose the run myself, and I have a tap on the shoulder from the S&C saying, look, listen, there's too many of them in the red zone now, so we need to ease back, right? But generally what we do is we would we plan all our sessions, as I said to you, like we have our depends what phase of the season we're in, so we plan all our sessions, and everybody gets a chance for an input and have a look at them. And sometimes we have to adjust them on the hoof, sometimes we adjust them on advance, and depends on what we're looking for. So the S&C coaches have an input on the session. They might look around and say, come here, can we do more of that or less of that? Likewise, the physios might say A, B, and C can't take part in section 4 of the session because it's too taxing on the return from training. So we kind of communicate an awful lot for that. But as I said to you, most of the condition that I've ever experienced with any of the teams I've been involved with is done through football, and the S&C coaches are more than happy to sort of let us do that, and and monitor us, and we work hand in hand with it. As we're very, very lucky. On the club level, like you're kind of looking at you're dependent on your eye. Really, you're dependent on sort of, your experience and saying, well, listen, I think we've enough done here today, or I think we can do a little bit more and stuff like that. You're not a lot of clubs are backed up by the science element of it, but I think you can kind of, after a while of working with an S&C coach and getting the science background, you kind of develop an eye for what's enough and what's not enough.
Do you kind of build up a bank of games of, say, this game here, and we'll call it, I don't know, Barcelona or wherever. This will give the players 20 meters per second if we play it in 4-minute blocks, without like being as specific with that. But like I assume the S&C coach is kind of thinking of it like that, and you're more thinking, yeah, there's some nice long kick passes in this game, but they merge together well.
You're dead right, and it's a great question, John. Like what we have there is by the step principle, adjusting the size of pitch, you can get different type of hits, physical fitness on it. Like for instance, my favorite game of a lot is a game that called the wall pass game, and it's a simple game where you just have 4 static walls kind of spread around evenly around the square, and whoever's in possession of the ball can use them as a wall pass. So if I kick it to the man that's on the wall, he just can give it to any man in my team. And the reason I like that game is because all the skills of the game are in it. So I would call that a technical development game. So I would play that to fine tune or to just upskill, keep the player's skills where they want to be. So you can put little bit conditions on it, suspend the touches, and use your left side or your right side, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. But with working with the S&C coach, we can make that tougher by making the pitch smaller or bigger, that sort of stuff, and changing a few conditions. So we would throw that out, and we might be playing that for 15 minutes, but we know we're going to cover X, Y, and Z of high speed running in that game. So again, sometimes he would say to me, Colm, I want any chance of getting that game played there for 20 minutes. And players love it because they're playing football. They're playing a game, So again, your job is to watch that, make sure that they are putting the effort in, which more than likely they will because of the game, So we have a few of them stock games, John, to be honest with you, right? Where, you're going to hit certain targets, but you're also going to, get the skills and the skill work in as well.
Do you ever make a slight alteration to a game, like a little rule or something like that, and 2 minutes in, the SC is like, "Whoa, what are you doing? This is like changed something completely that we weren't expecting at all here. Like there's way more twists and turns in the game, or lads are just, their heart rate shoots up like, oh, sorry, I didn't expect that to happen at all."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we've done that several times where I would kind of like, we used the Borg rating of the perceived effort rates, and sometimes they're all banked and gathered from the information that you pick up from players. Like a lot of players would be asked, how do they find, they've a sheet to fill in, or they have a form to fill in, an app after every training session where rate that activity, this activity out of 10, 10 being the toughest. And sometimes we might underestimate that. We might put in an exercise that we think is 7, and is actually, and the S&C coach comes and say, Colm, that's not 7. That's closer to 8 now that them lads are doing, and they're like, oh geez, I got that one wrong, which that happens, So it's good that we're very lucky that, as I said, they have real time stats that they can see, that someone's born in Isle when they shouldn't be born in Isle,
I suppose with that, then when at county level, obviously there's a lot of stats being built up. There's a lot of live information there. But even if you bring it down to the club level, I suppose with the future, I suppose the development of tactics at that level. I know you mentioned it's like 3 years after county that you'll see these things featuring in the club game. But I suppose one complaint I've seen from players or heard from players at club level is like, we shouldn't be trying to work on tactics. It should be more free flowing, let the game figure itself out, that kind of thing, when different drills might be put in, but how do you see like that evolution of Gaelic football really going over the next 5-10 years? How do you see moving away from tradition or moving back towards it a little? Or
no, what I see, Damien, is, and I've been thinking about this a bit at times, right? Like they years ago, Johan Cruyff and the Dutch football team created a thing called total football, and I think we're getting to that now. Like I think positions are nearly out the window in that every player can play any position. They're so comfortable on the ball now, right? And I think what's happening is now is you're creating a total football environment. I think tactically teams can adapt in real time to either sort of whatever they face. If they're facing an ultra defensive team, they know what to do. They'll keep quite comfortable in possession, keeping the ball, left hand passing, right hand passing, all that sort of stuff. Their skill set of players have come up. You look at an awful lot of teams now, their attack is based on defences. Like again, when we were kind of prepping for my club there a while back, prepping for a championship, we kind of put a lot of work into the 3 or 4 different types of attack that we could identify. So you have counter attacks where you might be able to get a 30-meter foot pass away and be very, very quick. You've got a slow build up where a team has dropped back. So you have to practice all them things, but they take different skill sets. Like for instance, when I was starting out, you used to hear an awful lot of don't take the ball into tackle. Right now, what you're saying is you don't take the ball into tackle, but John can take it into tackle because he's stronger and faster, and and things like that. So tactics are changing like that now, right? So where even teams are highlighting, right, this fella has a strength that we use, right? Where this fella doesn't use that. So to be so aware of that, to be so patient to get that fella who can break the tackle on the ball, right? That's a skill in itself. So I think what's happening is teams are so intelligent now, and what's happening is they're getting very, very real-time intelligence, and the skill set of players have really, really come on. And I think that's what's happening. Teams are developing ultra footballers where you mentioned earlier on, I talked about the physical athlete. Now I think it's the skillful athlete. Now I hope I'm right, but that's what I think is happening now. I think players are so skillful now, and they've got everything.
That's that's something we'd all love to see, because the skill part of the game, as I said, like you a few years ago, it felt like it was drifting off, and now individual skill sets are starting to really kind of pop their heads up, which is huge.
And I think, if you don't mind me saying, I think role modeling is massive for the development of underage players. And I think if you take, for instance, likes of Andy McDonald with Louth, Donald Keogan with Meath, Kieran Kenny with Dublin, right? Like they're role modeling a vast array of skills that the players in their clubs and their counties are looking at that, and they're trying to emulate that. And I think that's brilliant, rather than looking at someone who might be 6'4" that can just jump so high and run, but they can't do it on a solo or a roll or something like that. So I think role modeling is really, really important. And I think some of every county, I'm only have to name a few there, but in each of them counties, they're role modeling really fantastic skills for players to look to emulate.
The coach education has really brought on the kind of the breakdown of skills and stuff recently as well. I wonder in a way, because rugby really emphasised skills coaches over the last decade, I suppose, between kicking and throwing, different types of passing. I think Gaelic football wanted to follow in a similar path, and like people have a greater awareness now of what's in a skill, and particularly coaches at a higher level or experienced coaches at underage will really know how to step in, break down a skill and give that that small bit of feedback that should bring a player on quite quickly. Particularly Philip up in Derry, he's been really good at giving Philip Kerr, he's been really good at giving little breakdowns and stuff around that as well, which is definitely a positive for Gaelic football and all that way too.
But that's brilliant, right? And if that's filtering down to club level, that's fantastic. And you're given you're giving these players a brilliant chance to have a very enjoyable career. Now, reason young kids stop playing sports a lot of times is because they can't play them, right? And what happens is they go through various different phases, and they come to a stage where they realize, I'm not great at this, so they don't like doing that, right? But if you can upskill a player that he's having his skills are developing, the chances are they'll stay involved longer. And you think about it, right? You think of all, like Mickey Linden, all these players that have played to an old age are highly skilled, right? They're fit too, but they're more skilled than fitness, if you get me. So their skills stay for the whole game or for the whole career. Like a lot of lads have traded on fitness, and when the fitness kind of goes and their injuries comes down, they probably might fade away. But the guys that are highly skilled can play on. Like I remember, I'm sure every county is the same. You go to a club championship match, and there's nearly a man that's 40 years of age playing. And the reason he's playing is because he was so skilled, So if we can get the more upskill and we can get the younger players, the better.
You'd even have noticed in intercounty, I suppose, late 2000s there, Colin Corkery probably wasn't the fittest man in the field, but just because his skill level was so high, he was still able to cope and make up for the lack of fitness there.
Yeah, fantastic player.
Just on Coach Ed, Colm, because it's something like I'm involved in stuff as well. How have you noticed that kind of evolve over the last years? Like I know the new foundation was due to come out last year, just with all that's going on couldn't really happen. Like, do you see a level 3 at any stage? Is the tutor course essentially kind of fulfilling that role, and will there become a level 4 maybe at some stage, or is the focus more on let's make sure our foundation is as good as possible before we look to put kind of a cherry on top there?
See, the problem I see, John, there is you have a dedicated coach education department in Croke Park, and then you have 5 provinces And people always say, no, Ron, you're wrong, Colm. I said, there's not. There's 5 provinces because Dublin is classed as a province in this. And you've each got provincial managers in there, and you've each got head of coaching in them provisions, right? And the guys in the provincial council are brilliant. And some of the stuff, but they're kind of led by Croke Park. So they have to wait really to take the guidance from Croke Park. Like you take, for instance, Ulster now were very, very advanced in rolling out coach education programs. They were the first with the Award 2. They were hoping to push on with an Award 3. But I remember like there was talk of an Award 3 being specific for guys that are coaching at, say, elite level. And what I mean by elite level was if you were involved with a minor, county minor squad and so on, this was going to be made available for you. And you have to remember that like we're a community-based organisation within the GAA. There's people that only want to do the foundation level. They don't want to go to the next level. So they don't need to do the Award 1 and blah, blah, blah. They're just quite happy to coach their kids up to 10 or 12 years of age, and they'd probably just fit. And that's fine. Likewise, there's people that want to go to the top in terms of coaching county teams, and there isn't a kind of a course or a coach education program for them at the moment. Now that's where likes of all the colleges like Limerick and DCU have filled that void, and a lot of them have gone and done sports management degrees and things like that. But we should definitely be looking for an Award 3, but for people who want to coach at that level, if you get me, you know. So the Award 2 is kind of touches on some of that sort of stuff, but the way education has gone, not just sort of coach education, but education as a whole has changed dramatically. There's people making careers out of sports now, so there's a need there to kind of upskill and put something in place for the people that want to be exposed to that.
Even sometimes, like I noticed from being on the Award 2 and delivering a couple of them, in a way you're in a sense presenting some information, but at the same time you're also trying to stand back, say there's some experts in here, let them teach each other a bit. Whereas it's much more like, it's very hard to do that, because sometimes like in foundation you're even tight for time, like there could be some really off the wall statements here, I might keep a little bit more control over it. But once you get to Award 2 you're more eager to, let's learn from each other. I'm just going to stand back and fold my arms here a bit.
And there's something like that's one of the reasons I love doing all the coach ed, because you learn so much yourself. Like if you can create the environment and stand back, right, and if they build a trust and if they enjoy the occasion, people have a good story to tell and they have something to share. And you know, that's where I always thought were the best sessions, right, when you kind of got everybody integrated. So you were doing technical proficiency and you were kind of going through all the advanced skills. Somebody has some great ideas that you haven't seen before, that nobody's seen before, or might have a phrase or a coaching kind of tip or something like that, you know. So I picked so much from that. That's one of the reasons why I enjoyed getting involved there, because I thought I was at my opportunity to learn as much as share, you know, that sort of stuff.
One thing I have noticed a little bit though, since it came in that to coach it at any level you have to have foundation, if you coach at the next level you have to have Award 1, and that some of the foundation coaches, or on the foundation coaches, they don't have the same motivation to be there. It's more kind of controlled and you have to be there. And I've noticed a slight, not there at Award 1 at all, but I have noticed the foundation there's a little more, I'm here because I have to be here. And you're a little bit more kind of like, I really have to get you on side here for this. And you nearly spend the first evening getting them on side before you can really get into it. Whereas when everyone had volunteered to be there, it was easier nearly from the start. Have you noticed that and similar that way?
Yeah, I do, right? And like, again, like a lot of clubs roll out foundation levels because they think the need is there, right? And they might have sort of a clutter of new coaches, and they say, you know, we'll get a foundation going for them. But like that, there's might be 4 or 5 of them there saying, look, I'm only here because I'm down here with my son or daughter. I don't really want to be a coach. I'm doing here because, you know, I'm being roped into that, right? Now, as I said to you, that's fine, and you're going to get an element of that. They don't want to go any further, but all we want to do there is, can we give them something that they can make value into their session, that when they are coaching kids, that they give them a good experience and that they enjoy themselves and they keep coming back. So I would try to kind of stick with them, trying to motivate them to even just take a couple of things from it, you know, because look, again, we're not top heavy with coaches as an organization. I'm sure every club, all your clubs are the same. You see the same people filling in all the roles and things like that. And we're looking for the reluctant coach. We're looking for the guy that's in reading the newspaper in his car. You're dragging him out and saying, will you throw a ball up here for these? So that's where all that comes from. You try to say, look, would you do this course? And you might pick up a few ideas and things like that, you know. But like time's at a premium now. A lot of people don't have the time for that, the things, you know. And I know in Dublin, they're talking of rolling out the Award 1, doing all the theory online, no more classroom sessions, just practical sessions, which, you know, I think is a big plus.
Yeah, I was chatting to a lad last night. I think he's doing his Award 1 hurling, the majority of it online. But when eventually we get back to normal, they will still have to do the two or three practicals, which are so important. Like if I was asked to just give a theory foundation Ward 1, I wouldn't do it, because I don't think they'd actually get the benefit from it. Even if you had videos and diagrams, animations, it's the actual seeing them on the ground and seeing what someone else does and the slight twist they put in it. That's the real benefit from those courses.
Absolutely, that's the part, right? And again, everybody has their own style, right? And the delivery style, and as coaches, and you get to see that, and you get to kind of pick up a few things yourself, as I said.
I feel it's even with the practical sessions, it's nearly more important seeing what could potentially go wrong. Because like on paper, if you see the theory, you're like, oh, of course, if it goes perfectly, that's exactly how it works. Every kid follows it to the T, but like that never happens in a session. And some kid will do something, you're like, I never in a million years thought anybody could do it that way. But then when they do it, you're like, that's probably because I didn't explain this properly, or I didn't do X, Y, Z.
Absolutely. And then there's your reflection that Damien was talking about earlier on. When you reflect back on it, to say, well, maybe I didn't communicate properly there. Maybe I didn't get my point across, So there's loads in it. And that's why you need to experience that. And you know something? That's difficult, coaching in front of people, right? And that in itself is taking you out of your comfort zone, and it's putting you kind of sort of that you're really, really focused on what your body language, your projection of your voice, right? All that sort of stuff. Like that's what that course is. It's just as valuable as all the information.
I suppose that's one. I suppose roadblock that's there at the moment. Our life at the moment is a major roadblock that we're experiencing. But are there any other kind of maybe things that you perceive to be kind of issues or roadblocks, as I said, into, I suppose, development of coaching, to the development of the sport at the moment, that you'd like to see change a little? Obviously, like not being able to get coaches in person at the moment to help them, develop their own coaching skills, to bring back to the clubs, to try out and put their skills to practice. But is there anything else that's really popping up?
Well, for me, from my current experiences is number one would be lack of games. Like if you take any of the other, you're nearly frowned upon if you speak about other sports, but all our competitors have a serious games program, and it's stuck to rigidly, and people know exactly where they stand. We're kind of a little bit loose in that, well, particularly my experiences on hand. We don't have enough games for our underage players, right? And if you don't have enough games, it means you're going to train more. So you're going to get coaches, like we spoke about earlier on, the reluctant volunteers. They're going to find it very frustrating having to do more coaching than managing games as such. So they might have a ratio of something like 4 sessions per game, where it'd be brilliant if you get it down to 2 sessions per game. Right? If you're very lucky at that, because then there's less coaching and there's more playing, and kids love playing and it's more enjoyable. From the other end of where I am, like the bar has been raised so high in intercounty at the moment that, as I said to you, I do believe that they're brilliant role models, but if you take Dublin at the moment, like the bar has been set so high that a lot of teams might just feel, do you know what, is it worth it? Do you know, we can't catch them, that sort of stuff. So again, I think they're kind of perceived roadblocks. Like if you get me in that the 2 roadblocks I'd see at each end, and like you mentioned, but we talked about the club All Irelands and the club interprovincials, and how teams are kind of level. Although you have Corofin, but teams can compete against Corofin. They can go in there, right, and okay, they're in awe of them, but they know that if they really are up, play well, they could probably beat them. That way sort of stuff. So again, that's becoming very, very enjoyable. So I'd just be worried about that. Because the bar has been raised so high in the county, would sort of teams kind of step away or not realise that they have a chance.
Yeah, no, it's a big area, all right. It'll be interesting to see how things recover this year and into next. So obviously, as things are at the moment, we've no idea, or we don't have too clear of an idea of what's coming, but we'll find out soon enough. I suppose we've kind of focused big time there on coaching coaches and the development of the game, but when it comes to, I suppose, the game, we need the players. We need to focus in on the players. So I suppose, how have you found I suppose your I suppose your approach over the years to change when it comes to coaching the athlete? Have you is there any kind of standout there that has, I suppose, developed for you, or what would be your big mantras when it comes to getting your points across to an athlete?
Oh, okay. So I think, Damien, that's again, I'm very, very interested in this area, because I think that as much one you can get with an athlete, the better. Okay, and again, I love this analogy of tennis style coaching. So what I mean by tennis style coaching, if you're coaching a tennis player, everything is one on one, right? So if you're talking about footwork, you kind of looking see, can you improve his footwork, and you're engaging in a conversation and you're getting feedback. If you're looking at his backhand or his front hand, but you're spending so much time for it. I would love to get to that stage with you can't do that if you're training 30 players. Even if you've got 4 coaches, if you do the maths, you haven't got that time to spend, and that's what we need to do, particularly as young players. Now, just as coaches are always learning and looking to put social players play, and that's where I think the ILPs come in that we mentioned earlier on, the individual learning plans. And as I said to you, the official training guides in Gaelic football is child is up to 13 years of age, youth is 13 to 16, and then adult is sort of 16 onwards. You should be helping design ILPs for up to 13 years of age. Nearly 13 to 16 is probably 50-50, but from 16 years on, right, the player should be telling you what he wants to improve on. So if you can have that tennis style feedback or tennis style coaching, he's talking. And that's when I played football, I was in goals, right? And I was a goalkeeper. And it's not till I started seeking out one-on-one training that I feel I really reached my potential. So I would always have one session a week where it was just me and a goalkeeping coach. And that was brilliant. That brought me so on. And I think there's room for that for every player. I think, as again, we talked about it earlier on, but I think if every player could have a bag of balls and go down and have a little bit of direction from his coach, but then an awful lot more direction from himself, what he needs to improve left foot strike, right foot strike, explore the different kicks, explore the flights of a ball when he catches it with the outside of his boot, right, in an environment where he's time to watch all this sort of stuff. Nowadays, with videos on your iPhones now, you can get so much from videoing your technique. Spot and act coaching. Was my head down? How was my follow through? Right? How's my hands when I'm catching the ball? All that sort of stuff that can be done now. And if you can work, if you had time to sit down with a player and say, right, listen, whether things are right or wrong, here's a few areas we want you to focus on. Okay, your head position when you're kicking the ball off the ground, let's say if you're a free taker, right, or stuff like that. Your follow through, okay, and try to fatigue yourself and shoot, you know, and see how you're feeling, all that sort of stuff, right? That stuff has a huge area for player improvement on that. One of the things that I try to help players is that 9 times out of 10, right, if a fellow went down to the field or a girl, they just kick the ball over the bar. Right, so by trying to come up with some ILPs and some kind of individual learning situations, you're giving them a few kind of scenarios to practice, and then ask them how they feel on it and stuff like that. Like for instance, if you have 9 balls or 10 balls, if you've developed what's called a fatigue shooting routine, right, and it's the 8th and 9th and 10th ball that we're more interested in, right? So how was your technique then? Why was it off? Why did you not make the connection? All that sort of stuff, you know, and let players explore all them different things. I don't like seeing players run around the football field. I'd be always saying to them, what's wrong with running from one goal post to the other goal post? Stick it over the bar, collect it, run up to the other one, stick it over the bar, right? That sort of stuff. You can still do your speed endurance run with a ball, right? And you get good at what you do. So the more you have a ball in your hand, exploring your contacts, exploring all that sort of stuff, you know. So I think there's lots of room for that, you know. But again, I call that tennis style coaching. If we could create that environment, you know. Like if you could pencil in one session a week where a player just practices on his own, you know, where he finds that hour or an hour and a half just to practice on his own, you know, because it's that practice that every player did it. Like as I said, I was watching the Dan Carter documentary on Amazon Prime, and that's all he was doing, spinning the ball, right, watching as it bounced, running onto it, and trying his grubber kicks, trying all that sort of stuff, you know. And you often see David Beckham spend hours crossing the ball. Right, all that sort of stuff, you know. It's that deliberate practice that I'd like to see getting back to players.
I suppose that kind of, if say you take an adult player there, and who might be quite dependent on a dominant side. Obviously, you could work on in training, working on the bilateral skills to develop that out a little bit more. But I suppose that working on the training and creating games and training is one side of encouraging the athlete to develop the maybe what is a weaker side at that point, but transferring it through to them developing a confidence to produce that in a championship game where there's a lot on the line. Have you any kind of go-tos with that, or have you had any kind of struggles with players in the past where just trying to get them to be to trust in themselves, to trust in the skills that they've been working on big days? How have you kind of
absolutely that? Now look, again, if you're lucky enough to I always say that kids that have mom or dads that went out to their front yard or their front pitch and spent times with them, right? You have a personal coach, and you're very lucky. So a lot of bilateral players pick up their skills young, and it's just by simply the way kids work is if they're kicking the ball back and forth with their mum and dad, they saying, my dad or mum says nice things to me when I kick my left foot. So you're tricking them into learning that skills, right? Now, what happens when you're a young player is you have what's called a natural transfer. And if you continue to work both sides, your non-dominant side becomes your dominant side for a little while. And that's fine, right? And it's about being aware of that. But what happens after a while is they balance themselves out. So what happens along them learnings is a couple of things. Players either get scared and they stop practicing on their weak side because they're saying, oh, I'm becoming to use that all the time. That's my go-to foot. I don't want that to be go-to foot, right? Or what happens is they just see it through and they become proficient in both. But what happens then is if you get to a certain stage, right, people used to talk about development squads, and by the time you come out of a development squad, if you can't kick with both feet, the development squads haven't done the job, blah, blah, blah. It's not for everybody, but everybody can improve their skill set. So what I would do with an older player, right, who hasn't fully developed bilateral skills, is I would lower the bar. And I would say things like, it's your get out of jail foot or your get out of jail hand, meaning you don't have to be as good with your left foot as your right foot, but you just need to have it that you can get out of jail with a foot pass here or there. Because then like the second Kerry are playing Dublin, they know what each other had for breakfast. They know which side they're going to turn. They know which side they're going to their dummies. They know everything about them. So if you can continue to add to your game by creating a new skill where you're keeping your opponent kind of off his guard. So same way, if they know Damien never goes to his right, but you should be still practicing that on your own, right? And then one day you'll unveil it, right, as such, right? And what I try to do is I try to catch players in rather than catch players out. So if I seen you do that in training, I would have a word in your ear. You're not using the right, you have to pull it, you have to do the dummy sole on your right. Fair play, right? So you're catching players in. So you're reinforcing the positive. But again, that goes back to your ILPs. If you haven't got a left foot or a right foot, you should be working on that on your own, right? And your coach should be aware of it. Now, again, your confidence comes by doing it in training and then being caught in by a coach catching it in, right? And that way it grows. Look, fellas aren't stupid. No one's going to pull out a left foot, a dummy sole in Croke Park if they haven't mastered it. But their aim will be to do that one day, and if that's on their ILPs, right? And imagine like you're marking FL and he knows exactly about it, and then you do that, right? Like that is really, really positive. So what I would be doing is, again, if you got to a player, right, and it's on his ILP, you would be doing a little bit of work behind the scenes on it. Look, I don't know if you're aware of what we talked about a while back here in terms of these things called arrival activities. In that you arrive at training, right? Everybody is at training 15 or 20 minutes before training. So rather than kicking 45s over the bar or whatever, there should be a few stations set up where players can practice some of their go-to skills that they want to improve in, or some new skills. And it's low impact. It's not going to take effect of their energy levels or put them at risk to injury. But it's an area where they can explore some skills if they haven't got time to do them themselves. And ultimately, that's what we're looking for all the time. So you'd have a list of them, all these skills, lads. We'd love to master as many of these as possible. Some will get them quicker than the others, but if you can help them along the way, giving them a few tips and ideas and to do that. But I would be kind of trying to catch them in You get me? Rather than catch them out. So it's the second I spot someone doing something like that, you'd be reinforcing, the positive and saying, that's brilliant, seeing you doing that, Look, I can't dummy soul with my left foot, right? I can't do it with the right foot. So, I mean, who am I to kind of teach these players? But I can kind of help them along the lines of the importance of having it and stuff like that,
That's fantastic. And actually, just moving on from that, then just with I know you mentioned use of the Borg scale with senior players, where you can really kind of train, you can coach this in, you can guide this in, for working out the intensity of sessions and the intensity of drills and all that. Is that something you've used with maybe younger teams as well, or do you feel it's a little bit less useful as you go down through the ages?
Well, look, again, it depends what level you're at. Like, if you're dealing with players that haven't reached their lactic threshold yet, they haven't reached puberty, like they can play from 10 in the morning to 10 at night. They never get tired, right? So you need to be aware of what age group you're at. So again, if I'm coaching teenagers, then I would use that, right? But again, if I'm coaching juveniles, it's not really like everything's about development there. Right? They'll go all day. If you think of the long summers that we all grew up in, we're out playing football at 10 in the morning to 10 at night. We never get tired. It's only when we get older and we reach certain, like the lactic threshold, you get tired. You have to come in and take a breather. So I would kind of try to be aware of that, and that goes back to the Coach Edge program. I'm sure John, that's where coaches learn about these things, and they learn about the difference of juveniles and youths and adults and stuff like that. So again, I would use particularly the Borg scale for certainly youths and adults. And the thing about that is it's just a nice way of you kind of controlling the session, right? And taking the risk out of it. And, and again, is that it's all based on feedback from players over years of saying, I found that I'm very tough and this, that, and the other, and it's very, very easy for players to kind of, or for coaches, if they use the same activities on a regular basis, it's fairly easy to come up with your own Borg rating,
I suppose if we move the dial on a little bit, Colm, maybe focusing in on you a little bit more and your publications. I suppose firstly, what really prompted you to go, do you know what, it's time for me to kind of put pen to paper here and put my name on top of this stuff. But secondly then, I suppose, how have you enjoyed that experience? As I said, like there are coaches down in Killarney, where I'm from. The book is floating around the place. It's all over the country. So I mean that must bring a degree of pride in itself, and enjoyment too. That seeing your work pass out around like that.
Oh yeah, it's first and foremost, I suppose, Damien, like this is my hobby, right? And I know, it's kind of it overtakes an awful lot of my life as well. But it is my hobby, really. And so coming back to my coach education background is on the courses, the amount of people that used to say, "There's nothing out there for us. Have you anything out there? Like you're talking about all these new games based, but there's no publications and things like that." So that's what prompted me in the first one. Now, again. It's all self-published. I was I couldn't get overwhelmed actually the interest. Like both books have sold over 3,000 copies each, and as you said, it's gone all around the country and around the world. But what I tried to do was just try to I would record all my training sessions and all of my activities, and I have them going back for years, and I love looking back on them and kind of adjusting them. So it came from that. They were there, and it kind of came from the idea you're kind of saying to yourself, well, what's the point of me keeping all these? Surely somebody might benefit from them. Now again, it's totally, I wouldn't be kind of saying it's this or that. It's just totally up to the person to get whatever they want from it, but it's been received very, very well. So that's what prompted me to do that, and just from the coach education, sharing ideas and getting stuff out of that. And look, it's the same with my, like when I started doing the Twitter feeds and that, like I've been putting games and posts out about nearly 10 years. And when I started doing that, nobody was putting that sort of stuff out. And I remember Val Andrews saying to me, calling me, "You're very brave," he says, "putting that stuff out." And I said, "Well, Val, firemen are brave, right? I don't see this as brave." But what he meant was someone's going to come back and say, "Look at that clown, what's he at?" But lucky enough, there hasn't been too much of that, And again, I said I don't take that. I don't really take that very well, but most people are positive enough towards it, And look, it's not been shoved down anyone's throat. It's there. People like it. They want to get something out of it. Great. If they don't, they don't. I tried. You were very kind to contribute to the latest one, and I just tried to kind of give an all-round picture in that one about give a few ideas to people of what's out there, because like the nutrition is vital, and particularly like the club players, they're not really up to speed on it, because there's most club teams, adult teams, would have a budget, and so the last thing they're going to spend the budget on is, unfortunately, a nutritionist, like when they haven't got 10 footballs, that sort of stuff. So again, if you can get that information out to people, and that's what I was trying to do, like just kind of help people along, give them a taste of what could be done.
Yeah, no, I remember a few years ago somebody having to scale a wall in Killarney in the lead up to an All-Ireland final to get an idea of what Kerry were doing. But we see on your YouTube channel there's no need for a lot of that anyway when it comes to Meath, because you give us an insight. You give coaches around the country an insight into, right, there's the tactics aren't there. The game plan ahead of the weekend isn't there, but the drills, you can see the top athletes, like you mentioned Kyogi, and you can see these guys putting in the work. You can see what they're doing. You can see how they interpret it, and I suppose that's not it. That traditionally hasn't been a very GA way of going about things. So it's a new approach to some people. Have you had? I know Val mentioned that to you. We'd Val involved with us a year or two ago as well. But have you had other kind of coaches kind of say to you, geez, you are giving us a little bit too much? Or
Yeah, I get that a lot. And look, again, last thing I want to do is compromise anybody or compromise. But I think, and a lot of people will be saying, well, like, I've seen that before. Like, there's nothing really new in that. And as I say, I'm trying not to kind of go down the road of anything kind of tactical. I would have nearly about 100 hours footage at home of various teams and that I trained, but I wouldn't put half of it out because there's no point. But look, one of the reasons I like to share stuff is because there's value in sharing, because some coaches come back to me and they say, Colm, what are you trying to do there? Would you not be better off if you'd done this, moved here, there, or had them players there? And then I get something from it then. So it continues. And I try to share what we've done, not what we're doing, if you get me too. So again, we're always trying to recreate and things like that. And I really hope that, again, there's nobody been compromised and that people are getting something from it, because the feedback from it's very good. But I often feel like, Damon, I'd be like everyone's dirty little secret. Like, a lot of people look at the stuff, right, but they don't acknowledge that they look at it or even give you a hat tip, that sort of stuff. But that's so be it. I've always done it. I've been doing it for years, really, and I suppose it's just moving with the times in terms of you've gone from diagrams to videos to stuff like that. So I can't really see the difference of sharing a diagram of an activity and then actually a video of a team carrying out the activity, But again, as you say, you wouldn't be sharing any of your tactical work or stuff like that, But look, I'd love to see more and more teams doing it. I actually think that the GA should have a scenario where every county should show a clip of their senior team demonstrating a skill, be it through a handling exercise or kick passing exercise, because you're giving nothing away there. And again, you're role modeling that behavior for your generation, for your next generation, for your players in your county. I can't see really a problem with that at all.
That's a great idea. And yeah, there would definitely be huge benefits to that. To even just that you said, young children, seeing their heroes do this. We're all familiar with them showing up to jersey signing days and stuff like that. But to be able to see their heroes at home, from home, putting in that skill work, which is something I think has popped up a little bit over the last 12 months. There are little videos going out around clubs, at least, of some of the senior players doing bits, and it's been very positive in that regard. I suppose, Colm, we've taken up a lot of your time today, but I suppose before we check out, we've a lot of maybe coaches of younger teams and that who listen into us pretty regularly, who'd be very interested in your points and thoughts today. But if you any kind of a takeaway for them that for them to really focus on, what would your your top bit of guidance be?
Well, a couple of things would be never turn down an opportunity to coach. Okay, again, I've coached toddlers, boys, girls. I've even coached hurling once with tennis balls. I'd always try coaching them. Again, relevant, the hierarchy of value, I like to call it, in that if I'm coaching the child strand, it's going to be an awful lot of skill based and technical based, so it depends on what level you're at and make it appropriate. And that's easier than people think. Like I always make the point that if you went down to Newtown Blues to train the under 10s and had a chat with another coach and you threw the ball to the kids, say, we'll reach in a few minutes, what will they do? And chances are they'll start playing a game. So there's your feedback that they're giving you. So, I mean, what I try to do is try to always kind of have a session that the kids want. So if you're trying to coach them a skill, right, one of the ways that they recommend is this whole part whole, where you might play a game and then in isolation practice a skill and go back to the game. But there's two parts of that training session for the hour then as a game, and then the kids will respond to that. So again, the hierarchy of value in terms of the age group that you're coaching. So that's what I'd be saying to fellas. And don't be scared. Try everything. We're all going to make mistakes. And Jesus, I've made an awful lot of mistakes. I still make them, but once you learn from them, that's the most important thing.
Brilliant. And I suppose to finish off, Colm, maybe if just tell everyone where they can find you or reach out to you and find some of your stuff. That'd be great.
I'm on all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and that under Colm Nally, and the YouTube page is just under my own name as well. And if they're interested in the book, it's cntrainingmanual@gmail.com, and there's a bounce back mail there with all the details of how to get it. So that's where I am, Damien.
You're doing
Fantastic.
a bit of baking on Instagram lately as well, I see. Loading up the calories.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't know is I'm trained chef. So I've given up. I'm okay now. I've given up chefing since my early 20s because it didn't suit playing football. So I became a civil servant then. But so I'm just rekindling them old skills. That's all.
That's 4 of us with about turns in terms of career in life then as well.
It's one of those pages, Colm, that I have to pull the lads back from. Ignore that. Keep an eye out for the football stuff. Ignore the cooking. Oh, that's fantastic, Colm. Thank you very much.